Okay, welcome again to this DBW Analytics webinar on processing SAP data via the Alteryx server. The idea of the session today is to give you some ideas to show you what's possible and maybe put a few light bulbs and some notions in your head how you can improve your processes. So let's start with quick agenda. It's pretty much as we said on the invite. A few introductions, a bit of housekeeping, then take you through some different, as I say, some different aspects of using the server. So obviously getting the basics right first, followed by looking at how you can create applications on your SAP data using the server. That's sort of the user-based piece, but then going the other side. Section 4 there is to then look at the sort of the other extreme, which is to create real robust enterprise-ready data flows, system to system. Number 5 there is looking at how we can do something just a bit different. Maybe trigger some exception reporting, do something that uses the power of Alteryx and the server to cause actions and automate some of your processes there. And then finally to look at the S/4HANA migration and how the server can help, not just moving to S/4HANA, that's coming in 2027, but also any other migrations that involve SAP systems. So as I say, introductions, a bit of housekeeping. Basically, my name's Ian James. As you can read, I'm account executive here at DBW Analytics. Also on the line, although probably mostly quiet, is my colleague, our CEO, Darren Walton. He's ready and raring to take your questions. So if you do have any questions, there is the possibility of put those in the chat, and he'll answer as many as them as he can before his fingers cramp up. Last time we hit a record of 40-odd questions, so he was quite tired by the end of the hour. He did more work than I did. So probably won't hear from him, but you can see that our details there, and please contact us if you do afterwards have any more questions about any of our tools and functions. Okay, so the basics. Well, the first thing to say is that our tools, for those of you familiar with them, connect to pretty much anything in SAP, and the idea is we build a bridge between those SAP systems. You can see lots of them on here, but it's basically anything with SAP on the label, as it were, to connect those systems to Alteryx and other platforms, analytics platforms. We're the bridge, if you like. And many of you on the call, I know, are already our customers and using maybe our tools within the desktop designer version of Alteryx. But the good news is that every functionality you can do on the desktop, you can also do up in the server. So you can automate it and use all the power there. You'll see some of that obviously today. A few call outs of recent additions if you're an older customer, as it were, or if you're new. Notice we have now support for SAP Analytical Cloud. That means, and that's part of our standard offering. So if you've got a standard license already, you have that. You just need to upgrade and it'll be available to you. So that's an extra piece. And again, that's available in the server. Also, SAP SuccessFactors, but also Ariba is fairly recent addition, as well as all the other tools that you've been used to. Talking about those tools on those systems, depending on the type of object you have in your use case, the type of data you need in SAP, we have different tools within Alteryx that you can utilize to build into your workflows to pull data, say, from tables or T-codes, maybe Fiori apps, and APIs, and obviously things in HANA views and BW providers. All of those you may be used to working with hands-on on your desktop in Alteryx Designer, but our add-in for Alteryx Designer has an equivalent, and it sits over on the Alteryx server. And what that means is that any connectivity, any workflow that you have using our tools, either to read or to write, can be promoted into the server and run exactly as any other Alteryx workflow would. So all the benefits of the Alteryx server are available, but with SAP data too. So the way it works is that, as we said, we are an add-in into the Alteryx Designer. You build your workflow in the Alteryx Designer with SAP connectivity, SAP data being extracted or maybe being written into SAP. And then we push that workflow across into the gallery or the server version of Alteryx. And because you have our add-in there too, then you can use it either as a scheduled workflow, maybe as an output to a web browser, or even to, as you can see there, a mobile device. So really flexible possibilities here, and we'll look at a few of those. So that's the high level, if you like. Now, too much talking, let's show you a demo. It's nice to see what happens, kick the tires. So the first demo here is actually creating what I mentioned before, an application based on SAP data. And if I just flick across to my my Alteryx designer here, you can see I've got what's called an Analytic app. Okay. Now, for those of you who've seen our tools before, you'll recognize that we have a SAP logon tool here, and also another of our tools which allows us to run transaction codes within Alteryx. Okay, and the transaction code here I'm using is FBL3N. Okay, now what's nice about our tools and about Alteryx is they're fully integrable and they talk to one another. So, for instance, what we can do is we can say, hey, I'm not going to run this app. I'm just a designer. I want the user to come into the server to use their SAP credentials and to run the T code. And in this case, it's just a T code, but obviously you combine it with other data. You could enhance your workflow to make calculations, to bring outputs that are more interesting than just the output of the T code. But even just being able to pull the T code straight out to an Excel can be beneficial sometimes, so it's saving steps anyway. But I'll leave the imagination to you. Hopefully you can take this even further. But basically what we're asking for is the user to log in, okay? Using these interface tools from Alteryx, these are standard interface tools, we can ask the user to enter their user and password. Now that makes this into an analytical app immediately because it's asking for an interface from the user. What also happens there is that because the user's providing their credentials, when the workflows run, it's their credentials that are used to log into SAP. That means it's super secure, so they can only see the data they should be. They will be restricted. If they don't have FBL3N in their authorizations, they won't be able to run this workflow. It will fail. But what it will do is give them the data they should see, okay? We can also add to that. We can say, look, because all our tools have a dynamic input, we can create a whole raft of inputs that allow us to control, to parameterize the T code that we're running so that what comes out is exactly what the user needs. So as you can see, I've designed that, I built that here over on the designer. As I said, the next step then is to promote this up into the server, and that's real simple too. So you just say File, Save As, and we look at the Alteryx server. Obviously, I've got mine configured already. It's a quick step to configure it. But I say, hey, go save that over on the Alteryx server. Let's put webinar 001 in there. So we're saving this workflow over on the server, and off it goes. Now, when we save to the server, it's worth saying that we can save it in lots of a variety of ways. And I'll go into a little bit more detail, but we can save it into a particular area. We can therefore focus it. Maybe there's a finance district, if you like, a folder, if you like, within the server that we can save to that only finance users can use this. Maybe we want it only to run on a particular node, so we can have an expansive environment of the server for Alteryx. but we can get it to run just in one place or another. Maybe it's a particularly resource-heavy job. Once it's saved, though, we can nip over into the browser and check how it looks. So for those of you who haven't seen it before, this is the front end of the gallery for the Alteryx server. You can see here's my my new workflow within the server, and I can run that directly from here. When I do run it, and then this could be me, it could be a user, of course, we get what we expect. Hey, I want to run it now. Yes, of course I do. And however, it asks me questions. Remember, these are the inputs that I asked for. So I've created an application. And this could be run, obviously, on the desktop, as you see here, but also on a mobile device. So we can say, look, hey, give me my user. This is my user for SAP, the SAP system I'm interested in. So all I need to do, if I can remember the password, is then ask for whichever data I like. Maybe I want company code 3000. I'll leave the others, but you can change dates. But whichever we want to set up in here that correspond to the parameters in that T code. When I run that, you can see, let's not save that. You can see that's now running the workflow within the server. It's talking to our SAP solution, running, obviously applying all those parameters, and running the T code and outputting the data, as you can see, either onto the screen here, or as the eagle-eyed amongst you have noticed, I also had an output to Excel, so I could download that if I wished. Okay, so that really gives you a powerful tool to give access not only to data in SAP, but to manipulated data, to cleanse data. Maybe you want to bring data from that SAP T code and combine it with data sets from other SAP sources. Maybe you want to build a hierarchy in there from BW. Maybe you want to pull data from non-SAP systems, put that all together in a workflow and give that to your business users in a sleek, easy to use way. Okay, so there we are. That's one idea, and hopefully that's something that you could take home and consider for your own situation. Let's carry on then. So next section is safe access for all. So this is all of SAP. Let's start with a little bit more detail on the server. Okay. The idea with Alteryx and the server, obviously, therefore, is to prepare and blend the data. As we've talked about, combining multivarious data sources to publish that to a cloud solution, the gallery as you've seen, but then supporting all of that, we have the Alteryx Server, which provides a huge amount of governance and security around that data. Okay, so there are 5 S's here. So yes, it's secure. There's administration console. I talked about those districts which can be segregated across groups so that they can only be run. You saw my own personal area. Nobody else can look at that. Single sign-on is available, by the way. That's Windows single sign-on. It's totally scalable. I mentioned the node landscape, so you can start small, but maybe as your use of the server builds, we can scale up very easily. And obviously, if you want to hear more about that, then you can talk to your local Alteryx Server resource. They'll give you all the ins and outs of that. But it's very easy to scale up. It's very easy to apportion those nodes to certain areas, to certain geographies, maybe, to make this work really well and efficiently. Segregation I mentioned, but it's important, of course, making sure the right people see the right data. So you have that layer within the server to make sure that that's secure. Equally, however, you saw as well on the Analytic app that you can make people use their SAP credentials to make sure that that level of security is also applied. So you've got belt and braces, as it were. Scheduling, absolutely. I'll show you that shortly. But we can use the workflow to schedule any workflow within the gallery. So that lends itself to obviously automating your processes, making sure that the data is landing on your desk in the morning before you get there. It's populating maybe a dashboard in Power BI or Tableau or wherever without any problem overnight or at the right time or every 10 minutes or whatever's needed. You can schedule that, make sure the data is flowing and control that via the admin console. And finally, sharing. It's about collaboration in the gallery. So it only takes one designer to create a really good, useful workflow, maybe the one you've just seen, but we can share that to many users, okay? Either in the form of the workflow itself, if they're a designer user as well, or to non-designer users, non-Alteryx users, just to the standard business user, so that they can consume the data in a way that's easy for them to access and understand. Now, back to us, back to DVW Analytics. So within the server, you've got all that great possibilities there, but you've also got a massive different ways of accessing SAP data. We've mentioned tables and T-codes. It's possible, for instance, to run Fiori apps, OData reports, to maybe pull out BW information. There's lots. If you have BW, then there's lots of different objects in there that can be really useful. Obviously, your info queues and multi-providers, clearly, but also info objects which give you master data, maybe about your products or custom. Hierarchies you can extract from BW and apply to other data sets, perhaps. In HANA, we have a massive ways of attacking that data too and bringing it in. All of these can be used absolutely within desktop, but also in the server. On the right side too, however, it's worth noting that all that good standard technology that we use on the desktop, such as iDocs and BAPI and OData, can be used and therefore help to automate flows that write back into SAP. And finally, worth calling out is our RPA capability. So our little robots that run SAP scripting. These also, they're great for business users because it's an easy way to start that automation process on the desktop level, but they can also be run in the server too. And it's not something we flag up enough, maybe, that we can automate those, we can schedule, therefore, and use RPA to do the write back if necessary. So how does it work? Well, it's pretty simple. I think we showed you already. Look, we build and test our workflows at the desktop level. We use our plugin under Designer to do that. Make sure that everything is clear, working properly at the test level, and then it's as simple as publishing that up to the server to run in production. So we push it across into the server. That can be scheduled or, as you've seen, run manually, but the principle is the same. It's the server that talks to SAP, runs the necessary function modules, and extracts the data back into the workflow for further processing on the Alteryx side. Same principle on the right side. Again, we build and test on the desktop side, publish to server. There's not a to and fro because it's just a to. We prepare the data on the server side using the workflow mechanisms, and then we push that data using BAPIs and iDocs and the like, and maybe RPA into SAP. Okay, let's show you how just another example, another demonstration on what we can use excuse me, what we can use our server for. This time I'm going to schedule, as the title suggests, schedule a workflow. This is sort of the other end, as we said. The first example, the first sample there was about sort of business user, business friendly solutions using that analytical app. Here we're talking about quite robust end-to-end extract and post from SAP, and in this case, as you can see, to AWS. Now it could be AWS, but those that you know, Alteryx will know that you can push data to pretty much anywhere. SAP using our tools, of course, but there's no reason you can't push to Power BI, Snowflake, Tableau, etc., etc. Okay, there are tools to allow you to do that automatically. This is the, as you can see, the AWS version. So it's possible to pull data from SAP and push it into AWS. Various sorts. You know, these are table tools, so obviously very granular. The T code we talked about already. Maybe you want to run FBL3N every day. BW queries, obviously nicely formulated data that you're possibly using already, can be extracted and then used further on downstream. And obviously anything to do with HANA and all those other tools that we talked about. Now I'm going to turn these ones off because I'm just going to do the most straightforward one, just to keep it simple. Just table data from finance. What is nice, and when you're pushing into Server, is to make this dynamic. Okay, so in here I'm pulling data from the header table BKPF. I'm making sure that I only pull the line items that relate to the header details that I want, and then joining them and pushing that data across to AWS. Now, to build even more dynamic nature into this workflow, I've added some standard tools here, which include a formula tool. This formula tool just says, hey, calculate what today's date is. Okay. If we look at today's date, we can then pass that in the right format into the table tool. And so we're only getting today's data today. That means, obviously, when I push this to Server, I can schedule this, and tomorrow I'll get tomorrow's data, etc., etc. But it doesn't have to be just a single date. It could be the last 90 days. It could be the last day of the month, the first day of the month, whatever it is. You can adjust that because obviously the power of Alteryx is that flexibility. Once we've done this, pretty simple again, we can just save this again up into our server. Again, we'll call this webinar 002. Save it across, and that goes obviously across into our server. Now, what we're talking about here is obviously a more robust workflow that is not really for, at this stage anyway, for human, if you like, business consumption, but is to land in another system, system to system. Therefore, we want to schedule this, okay? And I'll talk about how we may authorize that, the users, and you may be thinking about that shortly. But we can allow that process then to run using probably a service user again and again by scheduling. Now, if we switch across again to the browser, here's my workflow. And let's use another of the functions on the server. So just schedule. So this is fairly straightforward. It's standard scheduler. So let's see, test will do on it. So that's a good name. And let's make it 1 minute's time. Basically, you can run it once. Obviously, you'll want to be running it reoccurring. It's just a standard sort of scheduler, very easy to use, very straightforward. Let's get this going. You can see it's kicked off. Now, what that will do is obviously at the appropriate hour, in a minute's time, hopefully, that will kick off the workflow and will push data into AWS. You can see it started. Shouldn't take too long, I hope. Not too much data because it's just 1 day's data. Remember, we did that, and we'll push it across. So if I look at my DVW bucket over on S3, hopefully that's going to finish up. It has finished up. So now if I refresh here, you can see here's my data. All is good. And I can obviously download that if I want, or do whatever I want with it. Obviously once it's in AWS, we can then use it as we wish. So if I just look at that in there, there's the data. Okay, so that's end-to-end functionality. So quite, a really robust piece of technology. You can build into that error flows if you like, because we get, obviously, if it fails or if there's a problem with the connectivity to SAP or whatever it may be, you'll want to know about it. You can track what's gone, what data's gone across, again, building that into your workflows. There's massive flexibility there. We're not just lifting and shifting, of course. In the simple example I just showed you, we're combining two data sets. But again, that's the power of Alteryx, that we can do lots of work to cleanse, to prepare that data so it's really usable and consumable exactly how we want it in the state over on the AWS side or wherever our target is. Okay, so another picture of Alteryx. Many of you have seen this before, perhaps, but it sort of sums up what we've talked about already. Alteryx is a tool for blending, enriching, analyzing, obviously cleansing and preparing. It goes without saying, but also what DVW Analytics brings to the party is fills a little gap. Okay, all we are is an extra source of data. Okay, on quite a few calls, I get asked about, oh, is it SAP or this? No, it's not. You can combine as many data sources as you need. Once we bring that SAP data into Alteryx, then it's just Alteryx data. It's exactly the same as any other source, and then we can combine and build and enrich and obviously use our analysis to build an output. And as we've said, that output isn't just to the ones we've just talked about, AWS, Tableau, Power BI, wherever it may be, but with the DVW tools, again, we fill another gap. We can also push back to SAP. When I say SAP, just to, some new kids on the block, if you like, you may, if you know a little bit about SAP, have heard of Rise and Grow. This is HANA in the cloud, so SAP HANA Cloud. There are two editions. One is a private edition, a private cloud edition, which is effectively if you like, an ABAP solution, but just on somebody else's server. So somebody else looks after the hardware. Absolutely, we can connect to all of that. But equally, on the public cloud edition, we can connect in different ways, but we can still connect in and bring data there using things like OData and Fiori apps to connect into those solutions. So we're very much future-proofed in that direction. All of that, of course, it goes without saying, is available on the server. Now, this slide, lots of arrows, but let me explain them. Hopefully you'll understand. All it is just to give an idea of, I've mentioned a couple of times about authorizations, but there's lots of different ways, depending on your use case, how you might apply the authorizations. And when I'm talking about the authorizations, mostly I'm talking about authorizations at the SAP level. But remember, you've got all that security and auth built into, and governance built into the Alteryx server too. So let's just run through a few of these. The easiest is the one I've just done probably, which is I'm the workflow designer, and if I follow the red arrows, then I can save credentials in a safe place within the Alteryx server, ready for use when I schedule my workflow, just as I just did do there. So when I publish it on the yellow arrow here into a secure place, a place that's maybe only for me or for my team, then I can schedule that. The workflow will run. It will retrieve the credentials for SAP. Maybe it's an SAP service user, or if I'm an IT user, maybe a wide access there, my own access. But it will then schedule that run and then obviously lift and shift the data as necessary. So that's sort of the standard one we've just seen. Alternatively, if we look at the business user side, the green arrows here, you can see that there are different levels of authorization. Business users, when they log into the Alteryx server, have Windows authentication against them. So that will mean that they can only see the secure districts folders, if you like, that they should be seeing. If they're finance, only finance, HR, only HR, etc. However, once they can run a workflow, there's then the second level, which is either maybe an analytical app that we've just shown you there. Excuse me. So this is username and password. They enter it and they're forced to do that. That applies their authorizations and the app works. Alternatively, if you run single sign-on, it is possible with our solutions to run and accept the single sign-on for the business user. So it will use, again, their authorizations on the SAP side and apply them. And in that case, they can just run any of the applications manually, because that will be used to log them into SAP. Now, this is just 3 of the ways. This is probably the 3 most common ways of authorizing users, both within Alteryx Server, but also on the SAP side, either analytical apps, single sign-on, or maybe a service user. But there's much more flexibility, and this is where our support team comes in, who are really great and know this inside out. So they're happy to look at a particular use case and suggest the best way. There's lots of flexibility here. So suggest the best way, or usually several ways of authorizing and controlling who can do what, who can see which data. Okay, so third demo, 3rd out of 4. This one is just an exception report, and just to prove it's live, I've just tried to run this today, and of course, unfortunately, our email has just been turned on with dual authentication, so it's broken my workflow. So unfortunately, I can't show you absolutely end to end where it sends an email. So, but you'll have to bear with me and trust that it does work once you've got the settings right. But I didn't have time today. This one is a real simple one, just to give you an idea. This is an exception report. Okay, so again, I'm looking at a table here. Okay, this is the table tool, by the way, if you haven't seen it before. You select the table within SAP. As you've seen, it could be tables, but we picked a table here, pick the output that we're interested in. We don't have to have every column, every field as the output. We can filter on any of those columns. So you can see here that I picked particular purchasing change dates, so when they were changed, and then a net price, okay? And one is between, one is greater than. So I'm looking here for exceptions where the pricing is above a certain threshold of 2,000, okay? Now, I've also in here used a formula tool, and again, this is where that idea of being able to calculate today's date and say, hey, look for those that have changed today or yesterday or in the last week, and throw out an exception report for that. Again, this lends itself to pushing into the server and allowing to flow. The idea of this is that it will run maybe every day, pick up the exceptions, and then push out an email, in theory, to the relevant parties. Okay, and it is possible to, using the wonderful power of Alteryx, to even segregate it. So certainly emails go in one place to one recipient. Other types of emails go elsewhere. So you can really go to town on this in a very simple, usable way. I'm going to save this without the email. As I said, that's broken, so apologies for that. But you'll get the idea, hopefully. But again, we just save it, fire it over to the company server here. Let's make this number 3 and save. And all this does is simple, again, very simple workflow. It could be much, much more complex, of course, but the idea is to give you some spark, some pointers as the type of things we can do. So here's our exception. Now this would probably run on a schedule, but let's just run it. It gets kicked off every night, say, give me all the exceptions in terms of POs from yesterday, pick them up from the table, get the details prepare them, package them, put them into an email and fire them off so they're on the right desk tomorrow morning. Okay. Once that's run, then we can see that we get the outputs that we're interested in. One is a CSV, the other is actually an Alteryx database file. So the nice thing about those is that they become viewable within the server. So it's an instant return. So these are all the ones with high or above, say high, above the threshold POs. Okay, so huge amounts of flexibility again, and it's great that you can get this thing to do the work, that is the manual trudge tasks that are done day to day by somebody at 9:05 every morning can be done overnight, and the email can be sent automatically. Okay, last section then. This is just to do with sort of one of our core offerings really, which is the data migration piece. Those of you familiar with SAP will know that ECC is going out of service as such, or sort of out of coverage late 2027. So there's a deadline there pending to move ECC solutions into S/4HANA. So there's a lot of migration going on. What we offer here is an accelerator. DVW, all those read and write tools together with Alteryx gives a solution that is proven to, as you'll see in a second, to accelerate this process. And there's all aspects of the process where we can help. Server, of course, comes into this because not only can we form the manipulations that are needed, the cleansing, the formulation of the data ready to be pushed into HANA. We can do all that work in an automated way over on the server. So just going through this very, very quickly. There's lots of pre-work that can be done using Alteryx and DVW to read and prepare data for migration. You can really save a lot of time in the data migration process. For instance, if you can identify and archive away or even cleanse data and prepare it ready to go to S/4HANA, so that's a smoother process. Once you're ready for that, the extractions are very easy. As you'll see, we can help in a second. We can help accelerate that. Once we're in the realm of Alteryx, of course, anything's possible, or virtually. So we can really cleanse and transform our data sets ready for HANA, and of course we can push those over into HANA. Equally, however, we might want to pull data back from HANA to compare with what came from ECC, and we can do a reconciliation. We have tools to help you reconcile field by field, line by line, exactly what has been put into HANA versus what we expected to be there. And we can do reconciliations in HANA and obviously report on that. And so there's huge amounts of reviewing and data comparison that can be done. I mentioned the accelerators, so this is a quick start. We have a vast array of accelerators that allow you to, from day one, be extracting and looking at the data that you've got in SAP and making decisions about maybe you want to cleanse it, maybe you want to archive it, maybe you get a feel for how you need to manipulate it over on Alteryx. We have products that are packaged broadly around business areas, and for each business area, it's a workflow that will pull data as needed instantly from within your SAP system. So what this does is accelerate massively those initial steps, because there's not as much need to plan how you're going to get the data out, how you're going to manage the data. You're already there. It's really well governed and transparent. Of course, this is Alteryx. You can see exactly what's happening, and you can control exactly where the data is going. Sometimes when I've been involved in data migration myself, data is being extracted from SAP, but it's not always clear where it's going, how it's being held, how well governed that storage is. And of course, because this is a workflow within Alteryx, it's automated, and we can obviously step that up and make it even more powerful if we push that into the server. I mentioned also in the latter stages that transparency is a really big key here, that we can pull data from both ECC and S4HANA and use tools such as what you can see here, our reconciliation tool, to compare those data sets row by row, field by field, to check if there are any differences, any discrepancies. So we can really quickly see in a very, very transparent way whether this is a business user or a more IT skilled user, can really see where there are problems very early on in the process, and it being Alteryx can fix them quickly. We can automate that reporting because we've got Server. So we can pull that together, and maybe we can publish a progress chart, a dashboard that gives us an idea and makes everybody aware of exactly where we are versus target on the migration. And equally, we can look at, like we've just seen, exception reporting. Can we set up workflows that identify and report exceptions, so that again, that transparency, that speed of change can be brought into the process. I said there was accelerators for all business areas. You can see the massive possibilities here. These are all areas where we provide those accelerators. And obviously, if you're interested in that, just get in contact with us, and we'll happily give you some more detail. So the key benefits. It's a very busy slide. Sorry about that, but the point is that it's transparent. It's not a mystery what's going on. Smoke and mirrors is a great phrase for business users, because the business users and sponsors at the end of this process, this data migration process, often are asked to sign off on the data migration. They haven't been involved for the last 5-6 months in what was going on, but they're expected to say, yeah, it's all okay. Using DVW and Alteryx, and especially Alteryx Server, we can accelerate all that. We can bring transparency, and it becomes a much more collaborative effort. So much so that one particular example, a mining company who did use with one of our partners, Alteryx and DVW, to do exactly what we've been saying there, moving from SAP ECC into S4HANA. By the way, it doesn't always have to be SAP to SAP. We could go from, and we have had examples of this, non-SAP into SAP, or vice versa, moving out of SAP. It's not a problem. But for our particular use case here, you can see in the bold there, it was absolutely successfully delivered with all that transparency and speed and flexibility, but at a third of the cost, and at 25% of the timeline. I can't say, if you've not ever been involved in a data migration, how hard work it is, how it's pretty much always on the critical path. This just changes the whole project of transformation between ECC and S4HANA or any other systems. So I really, if you're anywhere near that, I really recommend having a look at this and kicking the tires. Okay, last demo then. This is just to show you, and I'm just going to jump straight into the server itself. So this is just a data migration piece. Actually, I'm not going to go into the server itself. I'm just going to show you the flow first. So this is very simple. Oops. And this is one piece that I didn't mention so far, and maybe it's very useful. And it's something that you can do that's often overlooked. It's maybe your ECC system is still the primary system whilst you're doing this migration, and you're constantly pushing data across into S4HANA. But of course, as fast as you can push data across, new data is appearing on the ECC side. So you've got this parallel world, this parallel situation, and you're desperately trying to keep these two systems in sync. With Server and with Alteryx and DVW, you can automate that process. So all those flows that you built to shift the data originally from A to B can be used and sequenced to pick up new data and move that into S/4HANA. Okay, in this case, it's pricing for conditions. So we're picking up new condition records, picking up from the tables. You can see them here, doing a little preparation. You can see there's an entirely Alteryx piece here, because once we pulled the data out of SAP, it's Alteryx data. We're preparing that data ready to be used and pushed into HANA. And in this case, we're using our iDoc tool to push to S/4HANA. What's great here is that obviously, as I said, you can, it being picking up change data, you can just put it into Server and let it run, and it will keep the two systems in sync. So if we look at the flow, I'm going to run it now, but it's going to do that. It's going to pick up those condition records, prepare them using the workflow, and then push to into S/4HANA. And in fact, I might even just jump into my S/4HANA system, see if that actually works. I do need to remember my password, however. See if that's anywhere near. That's good. For iDocs, there's a transaction code to look at them arriving, and hopefully that's arrived. It has. I can see it has, and you can see here. This is the one. It's landed over on S/4HANA. So these are the new posted records. And if I look into here, there's the values that I pushed across with new pricing. Okay, so data migration, even, and there's a huge amount of work you can do that you can automate in those processes. So that's it for today. Hopefully I've lit some light bulbs for you, give you some ideas of how DVW and Alteryx on Server can be used to really accelerate and streamline your processes. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for joining. Hopefully Darren has answered all your questions. If not, we'll circle around and make sure that we do answer over the next few days. If you've got any other questions, then by all means, contact us directly. Be happy to talk more and hopefully set you on your Alteryx Server journey. Thank you very much for your attention.